My name is Dennis, I'm 34 years old, and I lived in an apartment in Vila Madalena, São Paulo. In 2019, I was completely addicted to occult horror and thriller films. I worked as a programmer, but my life was spiraling out of control because of this addiction that consumed my nights. I thought it was just harmless entertainment, but I was about to discover a terrifying truth. I spent every early morning watching movies like Hereditary, The Witch, and series like American Horror Story. My obsession was so intense that I lost 2 jobs for being late. When my bosses asked why, I made excuses, but the truth is, I could no longer live without watching these films. It was as if something inside me needed that kind of content to be satisfied. The worst part is that I spent over $8,000 on sound equipment and a television to have the perfect experience. I ran up credit card debt and lied to my wife, Fernanda, about the debt. She discovered the bills and was furious with me. Our relationship was deteriorating rapidly. And I didn't even realize I was destroying my own family. Fernanda, my partner of 10 years, started sleeping on the living room couch. She said I had changed, more aggressive and distant. Our daughter, Anna, only 8 years old, was also being affected by the attention at home. I didn't understand why they were overreacting. After all, it was just a movie, right? But little Anna started saying very strange things that confused me. One day, she came up to me and asked, "Daddy, why do those dark men stand behind you when you watch TV?" I froze immediately and asked what she meant. She simply said she saw shadowy people standing behind the couch when I was watching my movies. I tried to rationalize the situation, thinking it was just a child's imagination. I talked to Fernanda about it, but she said I was negatively influencing our daughter. According to her, Anna was having constant nightmares and would wake up screaming in the middle of the night. I thought it was a coincidence, but I began to feel uncomfortable with her insistence on these dark men. My routine was always the same. I'd come home from work, have a quick dinner, and then isolate myself in the living room to watch movies. Fernanda tried to talk to me, but I got irritated when she interrupted my movie session. I prioritized movies over my own family. It was as if I were under the control of something bigger than myself. The neighbors in the building began complaining about the loud television volume late into the night. The building manager even knocked on my door a few times because of their complaints. I would turn the volume down for a few days, but then everything would go back to normal. My consideration for others was completely undermined. I had lost control of my financial life. Besides the equipment, I spent a fortune renting movies on digital platforms and buying special horror editions. Fernanda discovered that I was spending over $500 a month on entertainment alone. She threatened to leave me if I didn't stop this excessive spending. My social isolation was complete. I no longer went out with friends, I didn't attend family events, and I avoided any commitment that would interfere with my movie routine. Fernanda said I was becoming a completely different person. She was right, but I couldn't admit that I had a serious problem. The situation at home was unbearable. Anna cried constantly, Fernanda was stressed, and I was constantly irritated by the slightest thing. Our house, which had once been a home full of joy, has become a heavy and tense environment. I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined I was about to discover the most shocking truth of my life. It was on a Thursday, October 24th. It was in the middle of 2019 that everything began to change in a frightening way. After watching a specific Marvel movie, something very strange began to happen in our house, something that would send my family into a complete panic. It was after watching Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that everything changed forever. It was a Thursday, October 24, 2019, and I had just finished the movie alone in the living room. Fernanda and Anna had already been asleep for hours, but I stayed awake until almost 3 a.m., watching. When I finally went to the bedroom, I felt something was different in the apartment, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Around 3:30 a.m., I started hearing whispers coming from the hallway. It was a male voice, low and deep, as if someone was talking to someone else. I thought it was the upstairs neighbors, who sometimes made noise in the wee hours, but when I paid closer attention, I realized that the whispers were coming from inside our own apartment. I got out of bed slowly so as not to wake Fernanda, and went to check the hallway. I turned on the light and looked in every corner. There was no one there. The apartment was completely empty and silent. I returned to the bedroom, thinking I had imagined it, but as soon as I turned off the light, the whispers returned with more intensity. This time I could clearly make out what the voice was repeating. 666-23, it was always the same numbers spoken slowly and deliberately. My heart began to race because the voice didn't sound human. There was something disturbing about the intonation, as if it were from another world. Fernanda slept soundly beside me, but I lay awake listening to those numbers repeating until almost dawn. The next morning, I told her what had happened, but she said I was imagining things. According to her, I was watching too many horror movies and it was affecting my mind. I wanted to believe she was right, but on the second night, something happened that threw me into a complete panic. Anna came running into our room, crying and saying she had voices on her wall. She said someone was whispering numbers to her and that she couldn't sleep. Fernanda became worried and went to check the girls' room but found nothing strange. I started to get paranoid and decided to test it. I lay awake in the living room, observing everything around me, when I saw something that chilled me. The television remote control moved by itself on the coffee table. It was a subtle movement, as if someone had pushed it lightly, but I was certain of what I saw. No one was near the table. I tried to rationalize the situation, thinking that it could be interference from electronic equipment in the building next door. Maybe the radio waves or Wi-Fi were causing some kind of interference with my devices. I was a programmer, I knew the technology, and I wanted to find a logical explanation for everything that was happening, but the voices continued the following nights, always at the same time, always repeating the same numbers. Anna began to fear sleeping alone and asked to stay in our room. Fernanda was getting irritated with me, thinking I was making it all up to get attention. The attention at home was increasing every day. What scared me most was the coincidence of the times, always between 3:30 and 4 a.m. The whispers began. I researched on the internet and discovered that this early morning period is known as the witching hour in several cultures. Could this have something to do with the movies I was watching? I decided to stop watching movies for a few days to see if the voices would stop. For 3 nights, I didn't watch anything, just reading or surfing the internet. I thought I had solved the problem. I was completely wrong. On the 4th night, when I watched a thriller again, the voices returned, louder and clearer than ever before. It was that night that I had the most real and terrifying dream of my life, a dream that would completely change my understanding of what was happening to me and my family, a dream that would reveal a truth I never imagined possible. The following Friday, I had the most real dream of my life. I was sitting in a gigantic movie theater, but all the seats were empty and the film was playing alone on the screen. The room was too dark, and I felt a strange chill creeping up my spine. Suddenly, I realized I was no longer alone. Someone had sat in the chair next to me. When I looked to the side, I saw a man with a beard, wearing simple clothes, but his eyes were different. They were eyes that seemed to see right into my soul. He didn't introduce himself, but I knew immediately who it was. Jesus Christ. He wasn't like the ones in the films or paintings I knew, but an ordinary, real man who emanated an indescribable peace, while at the same time causing me to tremble in awe. He pointed to the movie screen and said in a firm but loving voice, "Dennis, they are stealing my children's souls through these images." When I looked at the screen, I saw something that filled me with absolute terror. Dark creatures with deformed faces and glowing red eyes. They were literally emerging from the movies and entering the homes of those watching. The creatures floated like black smoke and whispered in people's ears, just as I had heard at home. They positioned themselves behind sofas and in the corners of rooms, influencing the thoughts of those watching. I saw entire families being manipulated by these entities, without even realizing what was happening. It was an invisible army, invading homes through the screens. On the dream screen, a symbol appeared that left a deep impression on me, an eye within a pyramid. glowing with a mesmerizing golden light. Jesus explained to me that this was one of the signs I should recognize in the movies. He said that Hollywood was being used as a tool to indoctrinate and turn people away from God, and that I had been chosen to see this truth. They place symbols and messages in every movie, Jesus continued, so that people gradually become accustomed to the darkness and reject the light. He showed me how the movies I watched were full of these hidden symbols and how they affected my mind subconsciously. I was being programmed without even realizing it. The dream became even more intense when Jesus took me to see what went on behind the scenes in Hollywood. I saw dark rooms where people performed rituals before filming, invoking these dark entities to bless their productions. It was an industry organized to spiritually influence millions of people around the world. You need to warn my children about this, Jesus said to me, looking directly into my eyes. Many families are being destroyed without knowing why. I am calling you to be an instrument of liberation. I felt an enormous responsibility falling on my shoulders, but also a supernatural peace that I had never experienced it before. As I was about to wake up, Jesus gave me one final warning. The attacks against you and your family will increase as you begin to investigate, but don't be afraid, I will be with you. He touched my forehead and felt an energy coursing through my entire body. That's when I woke up in a cold sweat and trembling in my stomach bed. I woke up at 5:45 a.m., and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything I had experienced. The dream had been so real that I could still feel Jesus' touch on my forehead. Fernanda slept beside me, and I remained silent so as not to wake her, but my heart was racing. The most striking thing was when I got up to get a drink of water and walked through the living room. I looked at the switched-off television and, for a split second, saw the reflection of the same symbol from the dream, the eye inside the pyramid glowing on the black screen. I blinked, and the symbol disappeared, but I knew it hadn't been my imagination. It was a sign that everything I had dreamed was real. That morning, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I decided to investigate the movies I watched, looking for the symbols Jesus had shown me. I had no idea that this investigation would lead me to even more shocking discoveries about the entertainment industry, discoveries that would make me question everything I thought I knew about Hollywood. Driven by a strange curiosity I couldn't control, I began to investigate the films I watched in a completely different way. Instead of simply watching, I began to constantly pause scenes to analyze every detail of the settings. It was as if an invisible force was guiding me to pay attention to things that had previously gone unnoticed. What I discovered left me completely shocked. In the first film I reanalyzed, Hereditary, I found at least 15 strange symbols hidden in the sets. There were pyramids disguised as decorative objects, numbers like 23, 33, and 666 appearing on clocks, documents, and even license plates. It was as if a secret language was being transmitted through the images. What impressed me most were the specific gestures the actors made during the films. In practically every production I reanalyzed, I saw actors making the OK sign over one eye, as if imitating the eye symbol on the pyramid Jesus showed me in the dream. These gestures appeared at seemingly random moments, but they were always there. I began taking detailed notes of everything I encountered. I created a notebook where I cataloged every symbol, every suspicious number, and every strange gesture I identified. Within a week of intense investigation, I already had dozens of pages full of evidence. It was impossible for all of this to be coincidence. There was clearly an intentional pattern. Most disturbing was discovering that even seemingly innocent films contained these symbols. Disney cartoons, superhero movies, romantic comedies all had hidden references. It was as if the entire film industry was following a secret script to insert these elements into their productions. During my research, I noticed that my perception was changing. I could identify the symbols more and more quickly, as if my eyes had been opened to a reality that had always been there. Fernanda thought I was becoming obsessed, but I knew I was on the right path to discovering a much greater truth. One night, while analyzing a popular action film, I discovered something that left me cold. In a seemingly normal scene, the lead actor was wearing a t-shirt with a symbol I recognized immediately. It was identical to a symbol I had seen in a documentary about secret societies. It couldn't be a coincidence. I decided to expand my investigation beyond films and began researching Hollywood producers and directors themselves. What I found on the internet made me realize that my discovery was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. There were entire theories about connections between the entertainment industry and occult organizations. The more I researched, the more connections I found. Producers who participated in esoteric groups, directors who made strange statements about channeling energies for their films, and actors who openly admitted to following unconventional spiritual practices. It was a complex network of influential people connected by similar beliefs. The scariest thing was realizing that I had been exposed to this influence for years without even realizing it. All the movies I loved most, all the series that hooked me, all the productions that kept me up late, all of them contained elements. It was as if I had been gradually programmed over the years. Anna kept talking about the dark men she saw when I watched movies, and now I was beginning to understand that she was seeing something real. The entities Jesus showed me in the dream really existed and were manifesting themselves through the content I consumed. My daughter had a spiritual sensitivity that I lacked. I knew I needed external confirmation for what I was discovering. I couldn't continue this investigation alone, otherwise I would end up doubting my own sanity. That's when I decided to seek out someone who understood the subject, someone who could confirm that I wasn't going crazy, and God was about to put exactly the right person in my path. Desperate for answers, I began to pray, asking God to send me someone who could confirm my discoveries. I had never been a very religious person, but after my dream with Jesus, I felt a real need to seek divine guidance. The following Monday, something extraordinary happened that proved to me that God was truly hearing my prayers. I was having lunch alone at a cafe on Augusta, near my work, when all the tables were full. A man in his 50s, with grey hair and a tired look, asked to share a table with me. I accepted, thinking it would just be a quiet lunch, but when he sat down, something prompted me to strike up a conversation about my research. I casually mentioned that I was studying symbolism in films, expecting a normal reaction of curiosity. To my complete surprise, the man turned pale and stared at me. "Brother, it's no coincidence that I'm here today," he said, lowering his voice. "You're getting into some very serious stuff. My name is Marcos, and I worked for 15 years as a cameraman on national and international productions." Marcos pulled an old photo from his pocket showing him alongside famous actors I recognized immediately. He had worked on horror films I had seen many times myself. "What have you discovered so far?" he asked, and when I told him about the symbols and numbers, he nodded in agreement. "You have no idea what goes on behind the scenes," he whispered. He told me about rituals he'd witnessed before filming, especially in productions with occult themes. Producers light black candles, chant in strange languages, and ask spiritual forces to bless the film. Marcos revealed, they believe this infuses the production with dark energy that will influence viewers. I thought it was superstition until I saw the results. What shocked me most was when he told about a famous actor who was literally possessed during a horror scene. The guy got into character and couldn't get out. Marcos explained, he spent 3 days speaking in a completely different voice, acting violently, and saying things in tongues no one understood. The medical team couldn't explain what was happening. Marcos told me that he converted to Christianity in 2015, exactly after witnessing this episode. That's when I understood that there is a real spiritual war behind the entertainment industry. He stated, "I left Hollywood and now work as an electronics technician. I lost a lot of money, but I gained my soul back." He confirmed everything I had discovered about the symbols and added information I didn't know. "These symbols aren't placed randomly," Marcos explained. "There's a specific department responsible for inserting occult elements into productions. They call it subliminal programming and believe they can influence people's subconscious." When I told Marcos about the voices I heard at home and what Ina was seeing, he didn't seem at all surprised. "Is this normal when someone is heavily exposed to this type of content?" he said. The entities linked to these films are beginning to manifest themselves physically. Your daughter can see it because children are more sensitive to the spiritual world. Marcos gave me advice that completely changed my perspective. Stop watching immediately and get rid of all this material, but be careful, because when you cut off the source of influence, the spiritual attacks tend to increase. They won't let you get away with it easily. He gave me his phone number and said I could contact him whenever I needed. I returned home that day with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief at having found someone who confirmed that I wasn't crazy, and fear at what Marcos had warned me about regarding the spiritual attacks. I had no idea that the situation at home was about to become much more intense, especially with my daughter Anna. What terrified me most was realizing that little Anna was changing drastically in the days following my encounter with Marcos. She, who had always been a sweet and obedient child, began to have unexplained tantrums every time I turned on the television. It was as if she instinctively knew something bad was happening when I was about to watch anything. Her screams were excruciating and left me confused. Anna developed deep, dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept well in weeks. She lost her appetite completely and refused any food we offered her. Fernanda was desperate because our daughter was visibly losing weight. "Denny, something is very wrong with our daughter," she told me, crying. "She's not the same child anymore." The most disturbing thing was when Anna started saying strange words that sounded like another language. She would mumble these words when she thought no one was listening, especially at night. They were guttural, dark sounds that didn't seem to come from an 8-year-old. Fernanda recorded some of these words on her cell phone, and we couldn't understand what our daughter was saying. One day I found Anna drawing alone at the kitchen table. When I saw the drawing, I felt a chill down my spine like I'd never felt before. It was a hauntingly detailed figure of a creature with horns, red eyes, and sharp claws. The drawing was too perfect for a child her age. When I asked her what it was, she looked at me she said seriously, "Dad, this is the man who teaches me things at night," which made me completely panic. I discovered that Anna knew specific details about horror movies that she had never seen. One day, she described to me an exact scene from a movie I had seen the week before, including dialogue and events that only someone who had seen it would know. "How do you know that, Anna?" I asked, scared. "The dark man tells me," she answered naturally. Fernanda fell into despair when she realized our daughter's personality was changing. Anna became aggressive with her classmates and started talking about death and dark things during class. The teacher called us in for an urgent conversation because she was concerned about her behavior. "Anna is not the same happy child she always was," the teacher warned us. Nights became hell in our house. Anna would wake up screaming and say they were calling her to go with them. She would point to dark corners of the room and talk to something we couldn't see. Fernanda stayed up all night watching our daughter, afraid of what might happen if she fell asleep. That's when Anna began to demonstrate knowledge that a child her age shouldn't have. She told me details about occult rituals that I had researched online, using technical terms that even I didn't fully understand. "Where did you learn these things?" I asked, horrified. "The night teacher teaches me," she said, pointing to the bedroom ceiling. The final straw was when Fernanda found me talking to Anna about stopping watching movies. Our daughter looked directly at me and said in a voice that didn't sound like her own, "Daddy, if you stop watching, bad things will happen to our family." It was a clear threat coming from the mouth of an 8-year-old. Fernanda heard everything and was in shock. That night, Fernanda gave me an ultimatum that would change everything. "Dennis, either you resolve this situation now, or I'll take Anna and we'll leave tomorrow. I won't allow our daughter to continue being destroyed because of her unhealthy addiction." She was crying and desperate. I knew she was right and that I needed to make a radical decision. I looked at my family, disintegrating because of my obsession, and finally understood the gravity of the situation. Anna was being used as a tool to keep me addicted to movies. The entities Jesus showed me in the dream were directly attacking my daughter to prevent me from giving up that entertainment. It was a real spiritual war taking place within my own home. That early morning, I decided to pray like I had never prayed before. I needed urgent divine intervention because I knew I couldn't win this battle alone. What happened in the next few hours would be the most terrifying episode of my entire life, an experience that would definitively prove to me that supernatural forces were fighting for my soul. On Tuesday, October 29, 2019, something happened that I will never forget for the rest of my life. I woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m., a horrible feeling that something was present in the room. The room was heavy, as if the air had become dense and difficult to breathe. Fernanda was fast asleep next to me, but I sensed we weren't alone. I tried to move in bed, but found my body wouldn't obey my brain's commands. It was as if an invisible force was pressing me against the mattress, preventing any movement. My arms and legs were completely paralyzed, but my mind was fully awake and conscious. Panic gripped me as I realized I was completely defenseless. That's when I clearly heard a deep, dark voice whispering directly into my left ear. The voice wasn't human, it had a deep, threatening tone that made my blood run cold. "Keep watching, we need you," the voice repeated slowly. "Your family depends on you continuing. Don't abandon us now." It was a threat disguised as a plea, and I understood the message perfectly. The most terrifying thing was feeling a physical presence beside the bed, as if someone were leaning over me, whispering those words. I could feel a cold, damp breath on my neck and strange, sulphurous smell that made my stomach churn. The presence was so close that I could perceive its malignity through all my senses. The voice continued whispering specific threats about my family. "If you abandon us, Anna will never be the same. Fernanda will leave you. You will lose everything you love." Each word was spoken with absolute certainty, as if that entity had real power to carry out its threats. I was completely terrified and unable to muster any physical reaction. During those endless minutes of paralysis and terror, I began to understand that I was experiencing a direct spiritual attack. The entities inhabiting the films I watched didn't want to lose me as a channel of influence. They needed me to continue consuming that content to maintain their connection with my family. It was a mutual dependence I hadn't realized before. When the situation seemed to be becoming unbearable, I remembered Jesus' words from the dream. "Do not be afraid, I will be with you." With all the mental strength I could muster, I began repeating the name of Jesus in my mind. At first, it felt like my mind was being blocked, as if something was preventing my thoughts from fully forming. I persisted in calling out the name of Jesus mentally, and gradually, I felt I was able to regain control of my thoughts. The presence beside me began to move away slightly, as if the name of Jesus were a physical barrier against that entity. I continued to repeat, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus" in my mind with all the faith I could muster. That's when I managed to gather enough strength to shout the name of Jesus out loud. "Jesus!" The scream came out with a power I didn't even know I possessed. The exact moment I uttered the name, I felt the evil presence being violently expelled from the room. The paralysis broke instantly, and I was able to move again. Fernanda woke up, startled by my scream, and immediately turned on the light. "Dennis, what happened?" she asked worriedly. I was in a cold sweat, shaking, and my heart was racing. I told her everything that had happened, and for the first time, I saw that she completely believed my experience. The fear in my eyes was too real to be made up. That night, we both stayed up talking about everything that had happened. Fernanda apologized for not taking my previous accounts seriously. "I always thought you were exaggerating. But now I understand we're dealing with something much bigger than ourselves," she admitted. "We decided together that we needed to seek spiritual help immediately. That experience definitively proved to me that there is a real spiritual war going on all around us. The forces of darkness don't give up easily when someone decides to abandon their domain. I knew I needed urgent spiritual guidance to face what was coming, and God was already preparing the right man to help me in this battle." Desperate for spiritual help, I decided to seek out the neighborhood evangelical church the next morning. I had never been a religious person, but after everything that was happening, I knew I needed urgent spiritual guidance. Fernanda fully supported me in my decision and said she would go with me. We arrived at the church around 9 o'clock a.m., hoping to find someone who could help us, Before I could even explain the reason for our visit, Pastor Jose looked me directly in the eyes and said something that shocked me. "Brother, God showed me in a dream last night that you would be coming here today. You're being attacked through entertainment, aren't you?" Fernanda and I looked at each other in disbelief. How did that man know exactly what was happening to me? Pastor Jose was a man in his 60s, with grey hair and a serene look in his eyes, but his eyes revealed a profound spiritual wisdom. He invited us to sit in his office, and before I could share any details, he continued, "The Lord revealed to me that you work in technology. You have a young daughter who is being affected and who discovered symbols in the movies she watches." I was completely speechless because everything he said was correct down to the smallest detail. "Pastor, how do you know all this?" I asked, still in shock. He smiled gently and replied, "Son, when God wants to use someone for a specific work, He prepares everything in advance. You didn't get here by chance." Pastor Jose told me that our church had already helped 5 families who had gone through situations identical to mine. "Hollywood isn't just entertainment, brother," he explained. "It's an organized system of spiritual indoctrination that aims to lead people away from God. Our church has already held 3 specific deliverance campaigns against this influence. Knowing we weren't the only ones facing this gave me enormous relief." He explained that the entertainment industry functions as a tool of spiritual warfare on a global scale. They use symbols, sound frequencies, and subliminal images to open spiritual portals in people's minds. The pastor explained that when someone constantly exposes themselves to this content, they end up giving legal permission for evil entities to influence their lives and families. When I told him about the paralysis attack I suffered the night before, Pastor Jose didn't show any surprise. "This is very common when someone decides to abandon this type of influence," he explained. "The entities don't give up on their targets easily. They intensify their attacks to try to keep the person trapped." His words confirmed exactly what Marcos had warned me. The pastor prayed for me in a way I had never experienced before. He placed his hands on my head and began praying aloud, specifically rebuking the entities connected to entertainment. During the prayer, I felt a supernatural peace descend upon me, as if a huge weight were being lifted from my shoulders. Fernanda cried throughout the prayer. It was then that Pastor Jose gave me a prophetic word that completely changed my life. Perspective on life. "Dennis, the Lord wants to use you to warn other families about these dangers. You will be an instrument of liberation for many who are trapped in the same way you were. God gave you spiritual discernment to see what most cannot." The pastor guided me on the next steps I should take. "You need to get rid of all material related to these films," he said. "Not just stop watching, but physically destroy everything you own. Only then will you completely sever the spiritual ties that have been created." He warned me that I should expect the attacks to intensify during this process. Before we left the church, Pastor Jose introduced us to 2 families who had experienced deliverance similar to the one I was seeking. They confirmed that the attacks did indeed intensify during the deliverance process, but that the freedom gained was worth any temporary suffering. "Today our family lives in complete peace," one of the wives testified. "I returned home with a determination I had never felt before. I knew exactly what I needed to do and was prepared to face the consequences." Pastor Jose told me he would be available day and night if I needed support during the process. That night would be decisive for my family's future. It was time to make the most radical decision of my life. The following Friday, November 1, 2019, I decided to make the most radical change of my life. I woke up with a supernatural determination and said to Fernanda, "Today we are going to burn everything, all the films, equipment, everything that is connected to this DA.